Welcome to the Stop Suffering in Silence podcast with your host, Denise Walsh and Rachel Timothy.
Hey, my friends. Welcome back to Stop SIS, Stop Suffering in Silence, where we create a space to talk about the hard things. On this podcast, you'll find that we work to educate on all forms of trauma and trafficking, as well as empower those on the healing journey. My name is Denise Walsh. I'm a clinical psychologist, and we're here with co-host Rachel Timothy. And today we have a very special guest. Our guest is an empowered daughter, sister, mom, friend, and mentor. And she came from a place of self-doubt, shame, loneliness, and confusion. Having overcome those thoughts and feelings, she now shares from a place of gratitude, growth, and discernment that was gained through acts of kindness shown to her at her lowest moments. Today, she is going to share with us a bit about one of those lowest moments, but then how creating and being a part of a membership and a community supported her when she needed it most. So big Stop SIS welcome to Lisa Stein.
Yay. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for being here. And I know we have a lot of people in the audience, a good amount of people in the audience who are parents of those who have either experienced trauma, addiction, mental illness, and they're looking for support too. You know, we often offer support to the survivors, but the parents ask us questions all of the time. How can I support my child best? And so you're going to share a story we haven't yet seen on this channel, and it's a story of mental illness as well as addiction with your super special son, Hunter, who is no longer here on earth with us, but yet I know you have a special bond with him. So I'd love to hear a bit about you, and then we can talk a bit about what you experienced with Hunter.
Absolutely. Thank you. And thank you, ladies, for having me on here. Just being able to share my story. And that was one of the things that I continue to remind myself over the last 6 months, because it has only been 6 months, that there is so much more to this story than I know. And I know that God is in this story. And that is truly why I know that I'm sitting here today with you, ladies. To tell you a little bit of background, I've been married to the love of my life for 7 years. And as I wrote that down earlier today, I was like, oh my gosh, they say the 7th year is the hardest. I'm like, no.
I'll tell you why. This is my guess from being a therapist. In my humble opinion, I think the 7 years is more about having toddlers in the home than anything else.
So, there you go.
Side note, go ahead.
And I have graduated from that as well. Right. But we have been married 7 years. And just like you said, I'm actually a mother of 3. Haley is I call her my caboose. She's 20. She's still here at home with us, and will be starting her junior year in college. Jacob is 25, and he's just still trying to figure out where he is, right? And trying to get back out on his feet again. And as you mentioned, Hunter is my oldest child, and he will forever be 29. And that's kind of the way, because again, as women meet women, those are always the questions. Are you married? Do you have any children? And at first I didn't know how I wanted to speak his name and still be able to recognize the fact that although he's not here on earth any longer with us, he is still my baby. And it might make people uncomfortable. That was something I recently tried to guide others on, was how to even say that, or to reach out to someone after they have had a death of a child, especially. So just saying that he's forever 29 helps me. And whenever I look back on my journey, because whenever you invited me to be able to speak here today, I look back on really truly how God has been with me all along. And where the mentor membership was born was from that walk personally, from trauma that I personally experienced as a 9-year-old child. And when this came about was the year that I was 49. So again, ironically, it's those things that hit home, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I've suffered for those 40 years, right? So such a biblical realization for me as well. But growing up in a home that was volatile as a child, then divorced parents, and then I was only 19 whenever I got pregnant with Hunter. I went through my only drugs, abuse in different ways, to try to gain the love and the I guess just support. I don't know a better word for it than that. Just being cared for, right? Being seen. And then, different marriages. I've gone through more marriages than I care to say, but again, it's all part of what has made me who I am, where I used to look at it in shame and embarrassment. And a lot occurred in those 40 years as well. But with that, I grew up literally with Hunter. So a lot of times I'll say that he saved me because of the life and the path that I was on. I actually was able to meet with Rachel, just the other day. And as we sat there and talked, my salvation was not even known to myself. Whenever Hunter in church, it was a vacation Bible school, that he was like, I want to be baptized. I want Jesus in my heart. So Jacob was just a little baby, and we went and spent time with our pastor at that time. And the pastor looked at me. So good job for him, right? As his parents, he spoke to my husband at the time and asked him about his walk and asked me about my walk. And I was not saved. So at 26 years old, I became a child of God. So again, it's just another one of those paths that I wish I could make this pain go away. I wish I could make these things not happen that had happened, but all along God was preparing and planning. A little bit of background about what I have done. I've done a little bit of everything. I have been in retail work. I was a licensed cosmetologist, where I sat holding hands with a woman anywhere from 30 minutes to 2 hours. And again, there's another place that these beautiful professional confident women sat across from me, holding my hand, praying for me whenever I didn't even know that they were praying for me, shaking their head most of the time at the antics that we were up to. But then I went into the real estate world and figured out that was not for me. But all along this journey, I learned something, right? There was a little bit, another piece. A friend told me recently that it's tools in our tool belt. Sometimes we don't know that we need them. If you think of a carpenter, it may be one little thing that can make a big difference with a measurement of something. And it's just continued to add to my tool belt. And about 10 years, I got into network marketing, where I truly started focusing on my own self-growth. And again, implementing daily routines, daily rituals, which I know for a fact has transformed me over the years. But I had to be purposeful. I had to be diligent. I had to surround myself with the right people. And then the mentor membership was born. So that too was a space that I just wanted to create. Because again, it took so many years and so many things and so many detours and dead ends that I chose along the way. What if I created a space that was a safe community for women to love on each other, to be able to be vulnerable but safe at the same time, and learn from each other's journeys? Because I pray that not everyone has to go through what I've gone through, but we also know that there's a lot of women out there that have had to face it and have had to either overcome it or they're still right in the middle of it.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell us a little bit about Hunter. When did you start noticing that there was some mental health things brewing within him?
It's definitely that fun age of 12. And any of you that do have boys, and I have 2 boys and a girl, and all of them are very, very different. But Hunter had that anger, just just he could just bounce off, at nothing, whether he was, playing with his brothers and sisters or brother and sister, or friends, or he would just get angry at something. So it was throwing things. The one thing that started that he punched, like in our neighborhood, our community, they have like the big signs at the swimming pools. Well, he like punched his hand through that, which was, not only did he see it and I see it, but and oh my gosh, what are we doing? So we actually started him in counseling whenever he was only 12. And it's one actually that's local that we've actually made a donation to in Hunter's name.
Hmm. So at the age of 12, you started noticing that he was not handling being, he had little emotional regulation. So things would set him off easily. Yeah. How was he at school? Did he display that type of behavior at school too?
Not really. Whenever he was 12, we did have him, he was involved in band, but again, that became something that other children made fun of, and again, if anyone has children that are in band, they have to carry their instruments with them most of the time. And, so, the name calling started. We went from a school that was, like K through 8th grade, I believe, whenever we lived in one town. And then he was in a much larger school with a much different dynamic of children that were there. So we started seeing the people that he was hanging out with, the other children that honestly we wouldn't even allow him outside of school to hang out with those children. And we would have conversations, it would be grounding, it would be taking away, things at that time. We wouldn't even let him have a cell phone. That was, 17 years ago. So those are some of the things that we as a family were watching. But unfortunately, we were also going through difficulties with our marriage. So hindsight, right? Mm-hmm. I should have definitely persisted and pursued and made him go through the counseling and the therapy that we were in. But whenever it was a constant fight and a constant battle, I never realized how those opportunities lessen once they turn 18. Because as an adult, you get the front seat, right? We just get the front seat to be able to be consistent in our actions and our walk.
So how long would you say he was in therapy at the age of 12? Like, did he get on any medication? Was it hit or miss? He was just kind of like, he got seen for a few times and then left?
Exactly. Okay. And again, he's very intelligent. All of my children are extremely intelligent. So he knew how to act, right? He knew the things to say. He knew how the deflection that he could present so that it would be, it's just a kid. And again, mental illness at that time is nothing like it is today, as being more talked about, more opportunities with whether it is with medication or just conversation and being able to have resources that were available. Never would I have said the word bipolar right then, but I definitely feel like Hunter struggled with bipolar and maybe even schizophrenia.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. And as much as we would love, medications can be super helpful with those specific diagnoses, but it doesn't sound like he necessarily got stable. Like, he was not necessarily always in trouble either, but he was kind of like just under the radar, where he wasn't necessarily getting in trouble, but he wasn't really stable either. Is that right?
That is very right. Yes. Because again, he went to school, he did all the things. In high school, that was whenever it started getting a little bit more heightened. We had moved back into the county that had a smaller and different, dynamic of the children that were there. And the first thing that happened, he had been caught smoking in the parking lot. So there was like a two times you're out kind of thing that was in high school. And, again, we had the conversation about not smoking and how bad it is for you, but also how you definitely can't do it on school grounds. And he went through all the, being suspended and grounded at home. And then he got in a fight one Friday with an individual. No one saw it. Cameras did, but no principals, no teachers. And then what happened on Monday? Monday, they went back to school. The young man that he had gotten into a fight with retaliated. And then all the teachers saw, the principal was aware. And whenever all of the conversations came out, both of those, he was kicked out of high school. And I don't know where everyone lives, if they have a school for children that get kicked out of high school. It's called MAP here in our county. And that was where he actually finished up. And he did get his high school degree or diploma, but it was in a school that he had to wear gray sweatpants, a white t-shirt, a gray sweatshirt. Anything that he took in had to be in a plastic clear bag. So, it was like all of these things. And I had to drive him to school every day and pick him up every day, whenever he should have been driving his own vehicle, but unfortunately didn't even have that privilege.
Right. Did he ever get in trouble with the law in terms of juvie or anything like that?
With that, the school did enlighten juvenile, and again, we went through things like that, which you would think would deter him from all of those things. And we came from a family that was above average. I mean, we weren't lower middle class, but he like wanted to brag about being that, which would be more so what I grew up in. So he would talk about living there rather than the home that we lived in, to portray this different thing. But the juvenile court system, I mean, in going through things recently, I found letters that the judge had him write to his brother and sister about how bad it was to smoke. We had to do all different things. He did community service, so that was really, fortunately, the only type of law, breaking situation that he got into. Your normal, I think he got 1 or 2 speeding tickets, but he was never in and out of jail or anything like that.
Okay. And so there's definitely, now, when he was living with you at home, did he get along with his siblings? Did you feel like you were walking on eggshells? Because with bipolar, there are moments and seasons where it's like he can't get out of bed, and it's depression, and it's anxiety, and it's like I hear there's a lot of guilt and shame potentially, and just this like low morale, right? And then with the manic, it's like, I've got energy, I got to do all the things in the whole wide world right now. And sometimes with the mania, that's where the psychosis can come in, where they're just not in reality. And for a stable person who's sleeping 8 hours and doesn't have these ups and downs, it can feel tricky in a sense of, we don't know who we're going to get today. But then also, how do you handle somebody who's not necessarily in current reality, if that makes sense?
Oh, absolutely. It makes sense.
So did you experience that when he was living with you?
Not whenever because again, during high school and things like that, he really would follow the rules. I mean, now granted, there were times before he started having to go to MAP, whenever I've taken the door, as you see, my door's behind me. I took the door off the hinges one time. And because, again, slamming the door, I was like, privacy is a privilege in this home. It can be taken away from you. So again, we just took the door off and just placed it somewhere else, and again, having those conversations. And I feel so much more knowledgeable now about how to have those conversations, and ignorance, right? I mean, it's not that I was stupid. It was just that I was ignorant to the fact of the importance of it, where, again, I think society as a whole is becoming much more aware of the knowledge, right, with our cell phones, or even like this that we're creating today, that someone can gain more information and more knowledge that can be empowering. When Hunter was 17, I was in between relationships and just needed to get back on my feet. So we moved in with my mother and grandmother for about 6 months. If you can imagine, my mother, my grandmother, myself, and my 3 children living, but that's also what you do when you're a single mama. You have to reach out to your resources. And we were there for about 6 months, and I was able to get back out on my own. But Hunter was turning 18 within just a couple of months, and he's got, I'm not leaving. And I'm like, I can't make you go. I mean, I know it would probably take an act with legal matters and things like that, but it was with my mother and my grandmother. So I felt that that was probably an okay place for him to be as well. But a lot of things came up from the time that he was 17 to the time that he was 29, from the manipulation and the narcissism of my own mother that was creating patterns and personalities, even more so in him, where things were hidden from me, things were not to tell mom, on both parts. So they both kind of equally kept things secret from me. And that is really whenever I started seeing more of what I was going to get, with the behavior and how I needed to tread on that.
Okay. So he is not necessarily getting in trouble. He's, doing school, not super stable, but not in jail, right? So
Right. Right.
there's and again, it can be tricky with kids and even college students, because you're like, oh, they'll grow out of it. And there's a piece of like, let's give him the benefit of the doubt. He'll grow out of it. He's just all these things. But what did you start noticing? Okay, before we get into his adult years, I want to ask a question about his teenage years. Is there something that you did well that you feel like, you know what, I'm really grateful that I did this habit or this communication with him? And then is there something that you wish you did differently, just for anybody that has teenagers right now who are maybe experiencing the same thing?
Absolutely. I feel like I did do well as being his mom, as being able to truly support him and provide for him and have conversations, even if he tried to ignore me, even if he didn't want to really respond back. And again, I talked with him like this. I grew up in a family that yelled a lot, right? So I learned how that I needed to also control my voice in order to be heard, as well as researching. There are lots of different books, on boys. Boys are very different than girls, and to be able to relate situations and things to things that he was doing. So, he loved video games. He loved playing out, just mowing the lawn. So in conversations with him, I would relate it to a video game, when you're trying to find those secret passages or whatever, that's kind of how life is. We have to figure out ways around things that we're facing. So that's definitely one of the things I would encourage is, sometimes you're speaking a different language to them when you're not speaking on their level, and when you can realize what it is that their heart is in, and be able to speak to them in that manner. And the one thing that I really wish I would have done, because again, I did not realize how once they do turn 18, they are considered an adult, which is unfortunate, but you really don't have the ability, to get them the help that they need, because knowing that he needed help, and not that I had all the answers or I knew how severe or serious it was, I should have and wish I would have, even if it was a temporary place, for him, for that guidance. But, again, there's so much more that's available now than there were then. I think the only thing that was an option was like literally sending him off to Kentucky to this boys whatever. And that sounded horrible. That sounded absolutely horrible to me. And he wasn't right. That bad.
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So it sounds like you really, number one, you set boundaries. You didn't necessarily let him walk all over you by taking out the door. You didn't save him from his criminal or the school issues. You were like, yeah, this is what happens. And he had to follow through on those consequences by going to the alternative school. You had expectations for what life looked like at your home. And he, for the most part, did the best that he could by following them as much as he could with a mental illness that was not really being treated. But when he turned 18, he was like a free bird and could do whatever he wanted. And it felt like you didn't have as much say or input, or like you couldn't put him in the car and take him. So
Exactly.
what shifted into his adult years? Did he go to college? Did he get a job? How it happened?
No college. He loved cooking. He took culinary arts classes his junior and senior year. And that was what he wanted to be. He wanted to be a chef, and again, as his behavior started, my their father and I talked to them about, go to school. There's a school here, to learn how to become a cook, if that's what you want to do. But that was too much, I guess, too much of a commitment for him. You had to wake up early, right, to go to class. He loved to sleep in and stay up late at night. So he was going to have to give up something to get something. And that was too much for him. He started getting jobs at, fast food restaurant, working, maybe just flipping burgers. And then it graduated on up to where he was cooking in nicer restaurants and, maybe became the sous chef. And then, in different higher positions there, never that chef level, but he really loved what he was doing, where he continued to find, I guess, his ground in, he was a butcher. He was a traveling butcher for a local grocery store, and he loved it, absolutely loved it. And, that's the thing. It's like, you just think something like that's going to continue to allow them to focus and excel in that manner.
So what problems started bubbling up in his adult years?
I started finding out more and more about the drug abuse. There was a lot of conversation there with my mother, especially whenever he was living there. And it went from where he was living there with her to, the traffic that was coming there to her house, which did not need to be there at my mother and grandmother's. And then I had to get in the middle of all that. So then he left there. And he was never had his own place. He would be living with some people. And that's where I had other women in other different lines of work that I was in. At that time, I was in the banking industry, and I had a lady that had 2 boys of her own and was in just a continuous struggle with them, with their behavior, with drug addiction. So she would guide me, right? I was so grateful to have someone that helped me, because I couldn't continue enabling his behavior, nor would I. But I also had to allow that tough love, as we hear, he went from house to house, couch to couch. I would get calls in the middle of the night. Mom, I don't know where I'm at. I'm in Nashville. And he would ping his phone, and then I wouldn't be able to reach him again. So what would Mama do? Mama would get in her car to go and find him, right? Not knowing what I was going into. There was times whenever he was in relationships, and the toxicity between he and this female that, he was in a relationship with, to where I helped him find a halfway house. I helped him be able to find something like that. But with 2 children younger than him, I had to draw that line, because of the fact I wanted to protect them from behavior that was very unbecoming. And I thank goodness I feel that I have, because they are on 2 totally different paths. But it's where you have to see, and you have to know that you're not going to sacrifice yourself and safety, as well as the safety and future of my other 2 children.
Well, yeah. And I feel like too, as a mom, you want to fix everything. I mean, my little girl came up to me the other day with she had gotten hurt, and she's 10. And I said, "Do you want Mom to kiss it?" She's like, "No, Mom, that doesn't do it." And I'm like, "No, you're not at that age. Seriously." But as they get older, like literally, you're not the fix. And that's where the whole laying it down at the foot of the cross has to come into play. But the difficulty of that, I just can't even imagine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Did he ask to come home, and you had to set boundaries there as well?
He did not ask to come home. He just wanted help. Can I have some money for a hotel room? And again, I'm like, how do I know that he's going to use that for a hotel room?
Right. I need more information, sir.
Exactly. And there were times that I would go and I would literally pay for the hotel room, which
Right.
is so horrific to think about. And again, as I'm talking about this, even more things that I did. So again, anyone that's listening to this, talking about it is not as bad as it needs to be, right? It allows me to think about, I really did do a lot for him in the different phases of his life. That paying for the hotel that he was at, let me tell you, it wasn't a Hilton. It wasn't even a Holiday Inn, right?
Right.
I can't believe my baby is here. But, from 17 to, let's see, 24, about 22. So we had about 5 years of that, just
Okay.
all of the things. And I think he liked to shock me, and unfortunately I would be informed of his behavior, describing places that he was being, things that he wasn't doing, but things that he was seeing in the places that he was at. Because even he had a line that he drew at things that he did or didn't do. But just knowing, and again, just like Rachel just said, praying daily, nightly, throughout the day, just for that hedge of protection around him, because I didn't know. And that was the only way that I was able to take care of 2 children and work full time without losing my own self in the process of it. And it was about 7 years ago that he came to live with us, because he was out on his own for about 5 years. So it was whenever he was about 22. He lived with us for a year and a half. And whew, my goodness, so difficult. Having an adult child living back at home whenever they're used to behaviors, but also thinking that once he shut that door, that whatever he wanted to go on inside of that room, from just not taking care of things, making up your bed, changing your sheets, just simple things that we're like, hey, if you're going to be here, you're not going to be out until, who knows whatever time. If you're not going to be in by, say, 11 o'clock, we didn't even let him come in at 1 or 3 o'clock in the morning. It was like, that's not how this house runs. So if you're not going to be home at 11 o'clock, you need to find somewhere to stay, because it's not fair to and at that time it was just Haley, his sister, that was still here. But he was here for a year and a half, and we really, my husband and I would have incredible conversations with him, and again, just encouraging him on his job hunt, or his job. He kept jobs, right? He kept jobs and had income coming in. But it was about 4 years ago that he decided to move out with a girl that he had been dating for about 2 or 3 years, which was huge. It was so exciting. I was so excited for him. But at the same time, he also told me that his Nana was moving with them, which again, I was like, and again, it's hard to say that. And again, it's, if anyone has struggles with their own parent or parents being a not so good influence, you can relate. Because I just knew, I was like, I'm so excited for you and your girlfriend to have that place together, and whatever that future looks like. But I really think this is a bad idea. So
I think you probably saw both of our faces. We were like, wait, what? Why would a 20-some-year-old who's moving in for the first time with his girlfriend want his grandmother to live there too? What does his grandmother add to this dynamic that he says, oh, yeah, this will be helpful to me?
She made him feel like no one else was going to take care of her. She was going to end up in, a nursing home, and no one was going to be caring for her. She also, and I don't know if you want to share this or not on here, but she also had a lot of prescription pills that she was prescribed by multiple doctors. So that became a whole nother avenue at that point. So it took a different level. And I knew that once that went bad, because I do have 2 brothers that are also in this situation with me, but I knew when it went bad, I would be the one picking up the pieces. And again, we did. It took about 3.5 years, but they came to blows, one night. And then I had to move her in here with my family, my husband and I, for about 3 months, until we found her a facility to live in.
Right.
Wow.
Oh, okay. So I can imagine that in order to sleep well at night, you are praying. You really get to use your own coping skills and the skills that you learned through your personal development, which is why I love that you're creating a space for others, because you never know when life will pop up. And when you're using you're growth focused, you're reading, you're learning, you're journaling, you're doing all the positive coping skills that you can, not only does that help keep you above water, essentially, but when life does happen, you have these habits to fall back on that can keep you from drowning.
Absolutely.
We use a lot of metaphors here that sometimes make sense, sometimes don't.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully that makes sense.
Absolutely.
But tell us a bit about his last few years and what it was like to get that phone call.
You know, you always want better for your children than you ever had. And unfortunately, we can't choose the path that they choose, but he was working. Again, he was doing that as a traveling butcher, but to me, he was working every day. That's why we hardly saw him. So what I started seeing and noticing, we would only see Hunter about 3 or 4 times a year, you know, Christmas, Thanksgiving, usually his birthday or close to it, right? And then my birthday or Mother's Day. I wouldn't always get to see him on both of those days. So he had started to really remove himself from family time, family functions. But thankfully, you know, communication may not be, you know, people like to have conversations one-on-one, or they like to have conversations on the phone. That's not what happens with the 20-something-year-old. It's a text message. It's connecting with them on social media. And, you know, I would send him funny little things, very, you know, just encouraging, or, you know, something that would make him laugh and just keep that connection to me. And that's been like that for 3 or 4 years. You know, we continue to have a communication through there. Or I would say, hey, I haven't heard your voice in several days. I would love to hear your voice. Can you call me? And, you know, again, we would schedule a time and he would call me. But the consistency I wanted to be in his life, because I knew that I was a good influence on his life. I had no idea of the other influences, but I knew that I could send funny memes that would still say a message, you know, to him. Again, as a child, whenever I would speak to him on his level, it was being able to connect to him in a positive way on his level where he would hear me. And it was a post on social media. His face, I could see it in his eyes that it was darkness. It was absolute darkness. And it was on that Friday. And I sent him a message, and I said, hey buddy, how you doing today? And his response was, just another day on this earth. And I was like, I sent a screenshot of what he had posted, and I said, but are you good? That's what I always say. You good? He's like, yeah, Mom, I'm good. I'm just going to work. And again, weekends are busy. I knew that he worked on the weekend, so I didn't talk to him on that Saturday or Sunday. And it was Monday morning. It was actually Valentine's Day. No, it was the 13th. It was Monday before Valentine's Day that I received a phone call at 8:30. And if you're a mom that says the words, I just dread getting that phone call at night, or waking up to that phone call in the middle of the night, I want to encourage you to stop saying that. I want you to pray for the right people to come into his life. Because I prayed about that hedge of protection, right? I always prayed about that, but I wasn't as diligent about praying for the right people to walk into his life to help him on a different path. And, you know, whenever I heard the words that there's been an incident, and you know, my next words was like, what do you mean? And to hear the words that he had taken his own life. And then the questions again, I mean, just, I don't honestly, I had several phone calls with that detective after that, because it was a situation that the police were involved before he took that step. But it was all of the things. It was just trying to find out or figure out. But the detective, from the messages and the voicemails that he had left someone, he said, did your son suffer with a mental illness? And I said, nothing that I was ever diagnosed. And he said, I could tell in his calls and his messages on Saturday and Sunday to this particular person that it was a very manic phase that he was in, which has also given me strength and given me, I guess, just knowledge of knowing that he really didn't know what he was doing when he did it, because we hear so many things about that, when someone that's the choice that they make. It's they are in such a broken, lonely, lost space that's the only thing that makes sense to make it stop. Another thing that Hunter did do whenever he was younger, he did the cutting. That was part of the things that he did whenever he was in, junior high, which we also, had some therapy for him there. But I never thought that he would take that step because he was so loved. He was so loved, but in that moment, he was so lost. And again, the bond that a mother has with their child, I didn't know that morning. That morning I was just slow moving. I'm not that person. I'm usually up and getting things taken care of. But, and I obviously wear glasses. I didn't have my glasses on that morning whenever I woke up, but I sat straight up in bed and I could see the clock at the foot of our bed on our dresser. I couldn't make out if it was 5:03 or 5:08. Now I know it was 5:08 because as I sat up with literally just feeling like the breath had been taken out of me at 5:08, on his death certificate, the time of death was 5:10 in the morning. And with guidance, and I'm in therapy, which again, anyone that is going through anything like this, I highly, highly recommend. Wasn't always an advocate for it, but it has helped me so much with healing and knowing that I'm not that powerful to have stopped what happened. But in order to find strength and again, be able to spread the message that we have to be consistent in our love, in our guidance, in our own growth, in our own resources to make sure when something like this, because that I had people literally run to me, that were also a chain reaction of them connecting with each other. And I was so humbled, but so surrounded by so many people that, and I've used the words before when someone close to me was going through something, allow me to give you strength whenever you're in this space. I have never felt that like I did and have over the past 6 months, because there's absolutely no way I would be better. I'm not healed by no means. There will always be a missing part of my heart and of my life, but I'm so much better now because of the community that I have that surrounds me.
I think that quote that you just said, I know that I'm not powerful enough to have stopped it. I hope everybody hears that, because how your child goes forward, what the choices that they make is not going to be based on what you do and what you don't do. That power is not yours. And being able to not have to own that. I mean, it sucks, but wow.
I wonder if hearing from the detective the manic phase, was that one of the first times you started hearing like, oh my gosh, maybe that was the problem the whole time? And then you can go back and go, okay, so it makes a lot more sense when you have that sort of, and they don't typically diagnose 12-year-olds with bipolar, I would say. So it makes sense that if he wasn't consistently getting support, and they may, I don't have all the answers either, but it's not necessarily what they start with. So it makes sense that if he wasn't getting support at 18, 17, 18, 19, 20, all of those years,
right,
when it was probably really manifesting.
And he had said, the detective absolutely affirmed that for me, which again did truly give me some peace, because I knew that he was struggling. I knew that he was struggling with a drug addiction, which he tried to, that was his medication, right? He didn't want to, because again, the stigma that is associated with mental illness and therapy and medication. I would have because made a comment one time whenever he was here visiting. If you only heard the voices in my head, and I was like, buddy, then let's go talk to someone. That doesn't mean that anything's wrong with you. He's like, oh, they'll just want to put me on some medication. I said, well, you know what? If a diabetic has to have insulin in their system because something is chemically off, there's a chemical imbalance there, that may be something that you need to do just for a little while. Why don't we just go talk to someone? And it was always, but you know what? I asked.
Yeah.
That's where and why I think I have that piece is because I offered. I asked the questions. I always loved on him, knowing that I had that conversation with him Friday, because it wasn't always that he would have an interaction with me, but Mama would put those, good morning, I hope you have a good day. Good night, sweet dreams, I hope you had a good day. It's okay if a 20-something-year-old doesn't talk to their mama every day. That's normal too. But I sent the messages. I had the conversations, even though he didn't take me up on them, unfortunately.
So he knew he was loved.
He knew he was loved.
And that's
Absolutely.
awesome.
There's something called co-occurring disorders, where it's like there's mental health and substance abuse together. And typically with co-occurring, I would say the mental illness is the spark. Like the mental illness is what causes the substance abuse, essentially. Mm-hmm. The other way around is when you have a primary substance abuse disorder, then typically there's anxiety and depression that come from the withdrawal symptoms, that come from the detoxing, so it's both, chicken or the egg, what starts first. But it sounds like the mental illness probably prompted the substance abuse.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I only have a few minutes left because I do have another call scheduled, but I know you do too. So I think we'll have to wrap this up in a minute, but I'd love to hear, first of all, I want to honor you.
Thank you.
It is not easy to share a home and a heart with someone who is unstable, and it's not his fault ultimately, because yes, he could have gotten treatment. Yes, there's a lot of other routes, but yes, he was dealing with something that was very hard and not something that he could deal with on his own without getting extra support. So I honor your efforts and your heart to stay as consistent with him as possible. And it sounds like you did the best that you could with the information you had at that time, and he absolutely knew that he was loved. Is there anything that you would like to share to somebody who's currently going through this, where an adult child is not safe or stable, and it feels like there's not much you can do?
And as you just said, there really truly is limited capabilities on our behalf. But what we can do is why I created the community that I created, was because I wanted to be surrounded by positive women that were on a journey of simply bettering themselves. The word that I kept using last year, whenever the mentor membership was born, so to speak, it was simply to have a safe space that women could be vulnerable, but have a community that they were surrounded with. And you fast forward 6 months, that was exactly what it was for me. I've been able to find my feet again. All of the things that we talk about in there, and we have a different theme for each month, but it's on loving yourself, knowing how to say no, setting goals for ourselves, having those rituals, those foundation, those systems that are in place, because it may not be this extreme, but life is going to catch you off guard. Life is going to see what you're made of and punch you in the gut, maybe. And it doesn't mean that you don't have to pause, but how are you going to gain your feet to know that you are not going to just roll around in bitterness? And I choose to be better over that bitterness.
Amen. We'll put Lisa's website down below if you're interested in learning about the mentor membership, because I agree, being a part of a positive group of people who are growth focused and can lock arms together not only is helpful in the day-to-day life, but then when life does throw you off guard, you've got people there to pick you back up.
Absolutely. And thank you again so much for allowing my voice to be heard. That was one of the things that I continued to say the entire time was, I just know that God is in the story. I don't know where and what, but I know that he is in this story still.
Well, thank you for sharing. And Rachel, is there anything you want to add as we close today?
Oh, I got so much to add, but we're out of time. So we'll just, Lisa doesn't live far from me. So we're just going to have to meet up and keep talking this through because she's pretty dang special.
Ah, thank you.
Well, thank you, Lisa, for sharing your story and for allowing Hunter to live on through the wisdom that you are sharing to other parents, because you're not the only parent who has this struggle. And I love that you're adding a voice to all of them as well. So if you guys are listening and you're interested in Lisa's mentor membership, check out the website, learn more about what she's up to. And we look forward to connecting again. So have an amazing day, you guys. Be sure to subscribe, like the video, post any thoughts or comments below, and we'll see you guys next week. Thank you so much for listening to this powerful episode of Stop Suffering in Silence. If you are interested in booking Rachel to speak at your school, your church, or on your podcast, then please email openblindeyes@protonmail.com. If you are interested in sponsoring a survivor on their healing journey and would like to donate to Stop SIS, then please check out the link in the description box or show notes below, or you can email stopsis@protonmail.com. And finally, if you are currently suffering in silence, or you know somebody who is, whether they're dealing with a current trauma or one from the past, then we will always recommend that you reach out to your local resources and find a counselor that you can trust, because nobody is meant to suffer alone. Have an amazing week, and thank you for being here.